Welcome to the last presentation of the day. So I'm Elliott Mitchell, and I'm an artist turned game designer and then game developer. And so I'm here to help you make games. I also organize the Boston Unity user group. In Boston, we have about 500 members, and they consist of artists, designers, and programmers. So who is this talk for? This talk is for fledgling engineers who don't have their wings yet, learning to program. I'm sort of in that boat as a tech artist. I've recently decided to start learning C# about a year ago, so I've been getting into that. This talk is for dreamers, people who are dreaming of making games, want to make games, have these great ideas, but they don't know how to bring them to fruition. People who have visions of building architecture or exploring new grounds, not necessarily even in the game space. Like this slide has architectural plans and walkthroughs through the Oculus Rift. Exploring the mind, mapping, simulations. This is an actual product where someone puts this sensor on their head and they play games, and that's actually a map of what's happening in the neurons in the brain. So Unity is used for much more than games. And simulation. I almost put Surgeon Simulator up there, but I don't know. Might be a little too graphic. This is actually a honest to goodness medical simulation. And so if you're trying to teach or pitch your idea to people that don't understand what you're talking about, Unity is a great tool to do that too. This is a shot from a game called Elegy for a Dead World. And it actually started off as a game jam game made by Deja Bond's studio and Pop Cannibal out of Boston. And this game is actually an exploration of dead worlds, and you write poetry to it. And so this is, yes. So this is what, on the bottom, my awesome laser pointer, this at the bottom is what the player is typing, or you actually can read what other people have typed as you move through these worlds too. So it's actually just art, right? People can use Unity just to prototype ideas or games. And so this is a project, my first actually fully coded project. And so these are just some iterations of a spelling game I'm making. And this is probably took me like 5 minutes to put together in Unity with an art background, just to play with shaders and stuff like that and arrange game objects. And I'll get into what those things mean in a little bit. This is out of focus, but it's this is a nonlinear flowchart of this talk, right? So it's a visual representation of this talk, but it's poorly done. And the reason is that you can't really tell what direction things are coming in and out. And what I'm going to talk about today a lot are what makes a good visual editor, a visual tool. And so that demonstrates something that's not really able to be read. But there are some prerequisites to this talk. How many, just a quick survey, and I can't really see everybody. How many people here are artists? Awesome. How many people here program? Wow. How many of you program and are artists? Interesting. And how many people you don't do art and don't program? Cool. So this is sort of beginner, noob level talk for people doing using Unity and wanting to prototype and learn tools and stuff like that. So the prerequisite of the Unity editor, you really should know some things about the Unity editor and coding. And so I'm going to basically talk about first off, like visual systems and ways to create code and prototypes in Unity. Like scripting and finite state machines, particles, behavior trees, shaders, animation, and a whole bunch of more things like that. And other plugins, because these are all plugins or scripts and stuff from the asset store that you get that aren't built into Unity yet. It'll actually be interesting to see what happens when Unity 5 comes out with all this stuff. So my talk could be irrelevant in 6 months to a year, who knows. So yeah, for lighting, UI, networking. Actually, as of UI, it is a little bit more easy to use now, as of Unity 4.6. OK, so I'm also going to point you to some resources. So there's the official Unity resources, and then there's sort of like the Unity community at large, where you can learn also to make games and partner with people to make games and different ways to do that. All right, so some of this is review for a lot of you, I'm sure. But again, I'm giving this talk for people who may have big gaps in knowledge in certain areas. So what you should really know about the Unity editor is you should know the editor layout. You should what all these windows are, what a game object is, components. So game objects are sort of like the building blocks of Unity, and components are added on the game objects. And the reason I decided to add this in is I recently worked on the Unity training day, and I feel like there were people taking that, and they all finished and did well, but I'm not sure if people grasped the concept of like what you should sort of do before you do something like the training day. Like you should open up the editor and figure out what game objects and components are. Prefabs. How many of you here at the roadmap talk? About half of you. So the prefabs are sort of like these game objects that contain other game objects, and you can keep reusing them. You can instantiate them in a scene, and they sort of have a whole bunch of settings, sort of like a character walking, and they have particle effect on them or whatever. A common mistake with prefabs a lot of times is people will make a prefab, and then they'll put a prefab and a prefab and a prefab and a prefab, and then things break. In the Unity roadmap talk, they're working on that problem. But if people come from a Flash background, like nesting symbols, that works. It doesn't work in Unity. Go over the scene view. So there's basically the scene view, the game view, project, hierarchies. So the scene view is where you're working visually. The game view is what your camera is looking through, like the view from your camera or cameras, because you can overlay them. The hierarchy is what's going on in your scene. The project is what's going on, where your files are saved. And the inspector is sort of, when you select something as scene view, it's where you see it. So I might be pointing out really obvious things to people, but bear with me. We did those. There's a concept of layers, sort of like Photoshop or After Effects or something like that. You can put something on a layer, and you can turn all those things off on the layer, make their visibility, or have, say, you want to move a character, and you're just clicking on the floor like in Unity Training Day, but it has to hit something just on that layer. Like everything in that layer will trigger something or have a raycast. So tags and layers are ways to find objects or separate them from other objects. And then you should look into the user interface. And for beginners in Unity, the user interface has sort of been really terrible for years, forever. It's ridiculous, and if you weren't a programmer, you basically couldn't do anything with Unity GUI. No, that's not true. Unity GUI is the new thing. That's good. With the old GUI system in Unity, on GUI, and it had a lot of draw calls, which are really bad when you're doing mobile. And also, Unity is a 2D and 3D platform, and there are systems for making 2D and 3D user interfaces. And now with whatever they're calling their new GUI system, it works with both in 4.6. And then animation. So you can do sprite-based animation, which are a bunch of little cells, sort of traditional sprite animations where it's just flipping through a bunch of images like a flip book, or you can do 3D animation. And then there's things to think about also, like lighting. It's not hard to do lighting, but what you need to know is if you're doing a mobile game or a PC game, sometimes a mobile game or an older computer won't be able to run properly with all these lights, and so you would bake them with light maps. And so you sort of want to look into this sort of thing. There's materials and shaders. Materials are sort of, I don't think I have a picture of one. Material is holds your textures, and the shader, sort of the properties of that. Like, how many of you were at the Shader Forge talk? That was awesome, wasn't it? So that deals with building shaders. We'll get into this stuff. And then how do you render this? Is it forward rendering, deferred rendering, all those kind of things. And probably most importantly is knowing where the settings, project settings, render settings are. And there's just a lot of different things to play with in there that can totally make or break your game. So, and then importing assets. How many of you have actually been playing around? How many people have not really played around with Unity that much? No, so I'm totally wasting your time on those slides. All right. So the solution for people to make games that don't really know how to program really comes down to plugins and also learning how to program. Various different input devices. Yeah, the Steam's prototype controller, the Oculus, the Leap Motion, all these different input devices actually enable people to do things to create experiences that haven't been easy to do before. Like the Oculus has a plugin, you put it in and it starts to work. And then there's thinking about going to Steam, thinking about these platforms. You have a lot of them to deal with, and so you really want to sort of, when you're planning whatever you're going to make, you want to really think about what platforms you're going to target kind of early on. Otherwise, well, luckily you're using Unity, but it could be a lot of work, especially if you're coding stuff. Version control. That's really been kind of a problem with Unity also for a while, and I know a lot of artists get tripped up on version control. Just out of curiosity, how many people use Unity's asset server here? Just a couple. Yeah. What about Git or something like that? A lot. How many artists use Git? Wow. And then there's Dropbox, right? Don't use Dropbox with Unity. So programming is very helpful, but it's not. If you don't understand what that says, then you need to learn programming. So programming is very helpful, right? So Unity is object-oriented, and I'm putting all this in, even if this is for artists. I want you to learn something about programming, because even with all these plugins and tools I'm giving you, or I'm not giving you that I'm talking about, there is always some element of programming that you're going to have to do. Maybe it's one line of code, or maybe it's you're taking something and sort of cut and paste hacking it, sort of like Carl is saying he does at the keynote. So it's C# and uNITYscript. I would recommend learning C# or just reading about it. It's what most documentation is in, and I guess I'm personally biased towards it at this point. IDEs are applications that you use to write code in. And so there's MonoDevelop, which I think is hopefully going to be updated or going away or something. Now there's Visual Studio, and that's like another plugin that helps everybody. Uses .NET for C# and the MonoBehavior class. You should know what variables, functions, and classes are. Even if you're using some kind of plug-and-play thing, you still need to know what these things are. If statements, loops, types, collections, namespaces, input, output, serialization. Serialization is saving files and saving data if you don't know. All right, so if you don't know these things, where do you find out about it? Unity has a great site that has a whole bunch of tutorials that will go through everything I just talked about. So if there's something there that I put on a slide and you have no idea what that is, go to the Unity 3D site, and they have all these archives on the editor, on scripting, navigation, all that stuff. And then they also have the live training archive, which is really good. Will Goldstone, Mike Geig, and Adam. I'm not remembering Adam's last name. All right, so now I'm going to start talking sort of about visual systems and Going to go over a few of them. All right, sorry. All right, yeah. So the scripting, AI, animation, shader creation, state machines, dialogue trees, particle systems. And where do you find most of these is on the asset store. Right. But I'm actually going to step back a second and talk about Mecanim. How many of you have not used Mecanim or don't know what it is? OK. So Mecanim is a finite state machine within Unity. And this is sort of their animation system now. So it actually is sort of a graphical, semi-artist-friendly animation system where you have you create these states. And these states connect with animation clips. And they can be 2D or they can be 3D that you bring in from whatever your content creation is. But there is actually, and you set up parameters, but there actually is coding involved in getting this to work. And they have animation curves. So if any of you are familiar with like Maya, Studio Max, those kind of things, it's easy to create these things, but sometimes it gets a little complex to run them. So I'm going to go over a couple, starting with visual scripting. We have uScript and Playmaker, but Playmaker, it kind of bills itself as visual scripting, but it's not. It's kind of like a weird hybrid. It's actually a finite state machine. You just move from a state to another state, and you can blend or just switch. All right, so uScript. You're going to see a lot of these asset store clips because I'm just showing you, basically, this is where you buy it and who made it. So uScript is actually really cool, and it's a true visual scripting tool. But when you read the documentation, it actually says you should know about the programming things I was saying before. But what it does is enables you to see nodes of events, of variables, game objects, how things connect together. So when I'm prototyping my games, not being a great programmer and being an artist, I'm creating these classes which contain a whole bunch of functions and lots of variables and how are they connected. And after a while, I just like put my head down on the desk and want to cry because I can't remember how everything's set up. But what uScript does is it sort of gives you a visual representation of what your code looks like. And it's sort of separate from Unity, but it actually talks to Unity. And you can see what's going on in Unity through reflection. And I'm not even going to go into what reflection is. But the other really cool thing about uScript is it will actually, you can look at it like this, but say you're going to ship a game or give it to a programmer after you prototype something, it actually generates C# code for you. And that's really cool. And so I'm just going through, you have actions, which would sort of be like a function, what's going to happen. You have conditions, if statements, events, like what's going to happen, and triggers, like someone comes in a room, someone clicks a mouse, whatever. And this game, The Novelist, is an example that actually Unity sent out a letter about that was made in uScript. And actually, I looked on the uScript community site, and that was the only sort of fully fleshed out game that I saw. A lot were sort of like other sort of smaller projects. And I put out a couple tweets and social media stuff asking people, like, if you've made a uScript game, let me know. But I didn't get a lot from that. And in a little bit, I'll show a video clip of what this is. But it's actually really cool. And this is their node system for this game. So imagine you're not a programmer, but you want to keep track of what's going on. How's this all connected? So this is their node tree. But actually, the creator of this game, here's the URL, actually was an engineer, but he just found it faster to do it this way. He understood programming. He knew what he wanted to do, but he wasn't good at syntax. And that's kind of what trips me up, too. So uScript is really good, is helping you with the C# syntax and visualizing. And then there's Playmaker. Right? So it's a finite state machine scripting. I don't know where it really fits in. They say visual scripting. Playmaker has a huge user base, really, really big. A lot of people use them in game jams, making prototypes. It has community. The Playmaker community creates add-ons for this, so that, say, there's not some kind of functionality that you want, like chances are that someone in the community has created it. And it's actually really easier to look at and simpler than uScript. It's just like a simple state machine like Mecanim in a way. It's simpler than Mecanim. But you just have these events like the door is closed, is it open, what's it going to do, what's this loop? This is another example of a game that actually just released by Little Worlds Interactive called The Counting Kingdom. I'm going to show you a video of this and the novelist in a second. But this game was made completely in Playmaker in a very short period of time. Jenna Hofstein, who made it, she actually paper prototyped the game first. When the programmer went and created it in Playmaker, she does not know how to program. She probably won't want me to say this, but when it came time to do Steam integration, someone's like, just put this line of code in there, and she had to have help to put the line of code in. And I was amazed because she just made this awesome game, but she didn't know how to put a single line of code in. Now she does, but it's pretty impressive, actually. So I'm going to show you two videos. I'm going to show you just a video of the Counting Kingdom trailer and the Novelist trailer. Just go one more slide. My handy-dandy link. Yes. So that was made without knowing anything about programming at all. And she did it really quickly, and it's Steam, it's going to be on mobile, all this. So that was really impressive. And now I'm going to show the clip from the Novelist real fast. So again, that was made completely in uScript. And I think a lot of there's assets taken from the asset store to make that too. All right, so back to Counting Kingdom for a second. So this is Jenna's node graph for Playmaker of monster spawning. So she laid it out in a way that visually made sense for her. And there's all these sort of conditions that can happen. When you actually play the game, it's just very, very smooth. There's no glitches or hiccups. OK, so now I'm going to move on to those are the primary two visual scripting. There's another one like, was it uFrame? But in researching that, it seems like it's not really for novice people. You really should know how to program pretty well, and it's a complex design pattern. So Dialogger is a branching dialogue system that actually works with Playmaker. And I should actually add that a lot of these plugins I'm going to show have Playmaker integration. I'm not sure about uScript, actually. So Dialogger is sort of similar, too, where you have this node-based system of text and events happens, and it can branch. How many of you heard of Discourse, the game by Alchemy coming out? A couple. I think they played around with this a little bit. I'm not sure if they still use it, but they have a survival game with these characters who crash on an island, and you're sort of interacting with them, and depending on the events and what happens, the narrative changes. It's a lot of text, so it's something like this would be great for. This is also great for just prototyping any kind of branching narrative sort of system, if that's what you're interested in. This is ShaderForge, a graphical system for creating shaders, because I don't know, if you're an artist and you want to create a shader in Unity, you're kind of stuck. So for a while, people are like, there's this Unity look to games. All these Unity games look the same. I don't want to use Unity. They all look the same. And it's because the shaders they had were pretty limited. Unless you were a programmer, you couldn't really do anything about that. And there was Strumpy before, but that was still pretty hard. So ShaderForge, they just had a talk last session, is really amazing. It's sort of, if you come from like using Maya or Max or something like that, this might be a little bit more familiar to you, like a node graph. But you basically have your different textures and all these different functions, and you can put together really cool shaders. There's a lot of samples of these. It integrates with the next thing I'm going to show, Marmoset lighting tools. But this is a lifesaver. You can see some of the different kinds of shaders that you can come up with. Actually, during the talk yesterday, today, there were a whole bunch of other ones that I thought were actually pretty amazing that I would never dream would work in Unity. So again, it's node-based visual editor, and it actually compiles shaders and text like proper shaders. So this is actually something I highly recommend if you're an artist making games and you want your game to stand out from other Unity games that is using standard shaders. iTween. It's a visual tweening or in-betweening, moving around a stage, so you're actually laying down a path and you can see where things are going to move. And that slide was out of order, of course. Lighting tools. So this Marmoset made SkyShop, and this is image-based lighting. And I don't know what's going to happen with this in Unity 5. This might be one of those things that goes away or adapts. I don't know. But this actually integrates into ShaderForge. And so it's almost like the mental ray renderer or V-Ray or something like that if you come from Max or Maya world. It's very, very cool. In doing my research and also looking at the asset store all the time, I see things like this, and I just buy them immediately. I don't care how much they cost. Like this in ShaderForge, because I come from more of a film background, and so it's always been really painful to have standard lighting and all that in Unity or any other game engine. Substance, you probably heard a lot about Substance during Unite. Substance allows you to generate textures, and it has a pretty complex node graph. What Substance actually plugs into, whatever you compile, your final file will actually go into ShaderForge. But Substance is really cool, especially if you're doing, if you want variety in your games. and you want them not to be repeating textures and stuff like this. But also, what's really cool about Substance is that if you're making an online game and you want the download time to be really quick, these are little, they're math files pretty much. It's like math. It's not like it's not necessarily using bitmap images. And so it will download these small files and then generate these textures on the user's computer as opposed to like on a server downloading it. So MMOs and other large online games use this sort of thing. But it's a really great tool. And there's a whole suite of tools, actually. You can start creating these substances in Maya or in Substance Creator or something like this. And then I actually just recently found this. It was just featured a week or so ago, and I looked at it, and I bought it immediately. I don't know how many of you played around with particle systems in Unity, but they also seem to be difficult to manage, and they kind of all look the same. And I highly recommend checking out Particle Playground. I don't think I have another slide for it, but it's unbelievable what this editor does with particles. And as you can see, it's up for a finalist for the 2014 awards. It will really make your game look unique. So there's also pathfinding is navigating. Say you want to have robots chase people or whatever. If you're an artist and you want to do all these behavioral things, like good luck. It's not good luck. So I had my first game that I published myself was Spin Spell, and it was sort of like a physics-based marble platformer, and you go around collecting letters, and I wanted the letters that you didn't want to come at you, and I wanted the letters that you wanted to run away from you. And I just bashed my head like, how the hell do I do this? And I finally gave up on it. And then I wound up downloading something, paying like $100 for A-star pathfinding. And then I found out that it was just like a lot of programming still, even using this package. But, Apex Path seems to be a lot easier to use for non-artists, although you can get in there and code, you can get in there and tweak, and it does involve a little bit of knowledge of programming, as most of these things I'm showing you do. And then here's another one, Behave 2. This actually is something that you should know about behavior trees first, and Angry Ant made this, Emil, and he used to work for Unity. And so like on his support page, he's just like gives you another page to like read all this stuff about behavior trees and then use this product. But it allows you to visualize what these decision trees are, and it's really a powerful tool, and it's actually well worth the $200. Like a lot of these assets seem to be like $50, $100, $200, and if you're an artist, you might be like, damn, I can't afford that. But if you think about how much it costs to hire an engineer to do this stuff, it's a lot more. And actually, if you just think about your own time, how much is your time worth? If I were to try to program a behavior tree, it'd be like months, and I'd gladly pay $200 for someone to do that. Now I'll get into UIs a little bit, and this is actually changing. This whole field's always changing, but 2D Toolkit's a really great 2D UI system, and it supports physics, sprites. They have certain buttons and widgets and all these things built into it. So if you're making, I guess I don't know if this is even relevant now that 4.6 was released, but if you're making 2D games, this was a really go-to plugin. And then for 2D, 3D, NGUI was good, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I kind of want NGUI to go away, and I hope, yeah, I hope that it goes away, go away. So NGUI actually, what the new Unity GUI system is based off of this a lot, and then they kind of moved and simplified it. But NGUI actually was, for the game Waggle I was showing you in the beginning, I actually did use it a bit for its event system. And it's really cool in some ways where there's these prefabs, like prefab button, prefab slider, prefab examples of 3D interfaces in world space, in 2D space, reducing draw calls. And for a while, if you were an artist and you wanted to make any kind of quick, kind of efficient user interface, this is the tool to go to. And hopefully the Unity GUI, the new Unity GUI, just kind of replaces this, because it's really convoluted and the support was, I didn't find that helpful. The other thing where there are a lot of prefabs that people would drop in, and I was talking about nesting prefabs before, so people would build these interfaces by nesting all these prefabs, and then they'd break. So go away. And then if you want to make multiplayer games or networking, the Photon is a really good solution for that from Exit Games. It's so easy to use. I went and downloaded some Unity demos, demo scenes of like, they have a Mecanim animation demo scene where this little guy's running around, he's doing flips and all this, and I'm like, I want to have 2 people running around doing flips. So I just took their demo, and I think within 10 or 15 minutes, I had 2 players over the internet playing each other, running around together. They weren't actually playing. This was really easy to set up, and there's a lot of these have a pro and a free feature version of them, but this is really cool, and it takes care of a lot of the back-end stuff. And like, is it a mobile device? Is it a PC? They host the server. Works really, really well. I highly recommend it. And then all these other little things that say, like, GoTween is, GoKit-tween library is kind of like iTween. It's a little bit more powerful, but I think it's not quite as artist-friendly. But some of these other things, like for getting like the iOS, et cetera, plugin, and these iOS, there's Game Center plugins and stuff. So Prime31 makes a ton of really helpful plugins. And maybe you just put them in your project, and you just need to call them by a line of code, and you have a little spinny thing when your iPhone's busy or whatever. But these actually are so worth the money. I would definitely look into Prime31 plugins if you want to like do any kind of store integration or mobile or networking stuff. Another really, really useful plugin for me was the C input. And there's a pro and a free. And this allows you to, you do have to code with this still, but it allows you to have more flexibility. And it's really hard to explain it without going and showing you code, but you can basically say you want to have your player be able to change the control inputs in the game, like what keys do what. This will put up a dialog. You'll be able to change that. It can detect if you're on a Mac or a PC, if you're using Xbox controller, or Oculus, whatever. It's super helpful. And again, in this, I'm working on a virtual reality game with different controllers, and this was a super time saver. And then if you're an artist or a non-technical type, and you say you even have your own art or characters, but you don't know what to do with them, the asset store has full-on scenes that have camera setups and particle effects and all kinds of assets you can use for environments to sort of test out and prototype your games. And Unity has a ton of free projects and assets on the asset store, and you can go through that. They put all of their demos up on the asset store, so like we just had a training day, so that's all on the asset store now. The Learn website, so I'm just going to sort of go over, like they have all their tutorials, the documentation. The live training sessions are really good too for these random things that you want to do, from very, very beginner to like expert. So I recommend going through their archives, because they'll go through for like an hour and explain. And when they have them live, there's actually a chat going on. So say you want to learn about making a top-down game, or if you want to do a platformer, a simple platformer, like they'll go over these projects with a live chat, and they explain it and answer questions to you. And then there's usually links to scripts afterwards. And here's some of their projects. And now I'm actually going to move on to a little bit of community stuff. And I don't think most of you were at the Unity community talk today that Will Goldstone gave, but this stuff's probably all going to change a bit. There's forums that you can look on. There's a wiki. There's an IRC chat. Unity Answers, although I don't really find Unity Answers that helpful for programming, personally. How many of you did the Unite training day? A few. That was actually pretty awesome. So they made this little game where this guy's running around shooting zombunnies and zombears and elephants. And this kid's having a nightmare. And the class went through this all day. The people who were helping out had a few days to figure this out. It took us a couple hours to do it. But so like these Unite train days, you take advantage of these things if you want to learn how to program or you just want to learn how to work with games. It's super helpful. And then the slides are available and the assets are available. And actually, I think they're putting this whole thing up on the asset store. So if you haven't done this or want to play around with making this kind of shooter, and it goes into like how to use Mecanim. This is basically, there's no plugins in this, but how do you do this stuff? It's all online for you to use. One really helpful thing for people to be empowered to make games and ask questions is just social media. Hashtag Unity3D for Twitter. It's just going crazy. I just have in my Twitter stream Unity3D, and occasionally, when I started out, I asked a lot of questions. I still ask questions on there, and I get responses from Unity engineers who work at Unity, and I get responses from people in the community. The Facebook one has a lot of events. You don't really get help on that, but they'll like tell you things that are coming up, which are really useful. User groups. How many of you actually attended any Unity user groups? A few. You should see if in your city or town or region if there is one, because they're an amazing resource to the community. I co-founded the Boston Unity user group with Alex Schwartz. We have, I think, as of today, 500-something members, but there's a lot more people who are actually part of this. We had a VR jam that had 104 people show up. Valve came out, Unity came out. We got to use their proprietary gear, and it was amazing. It was positional head tracking stuff. So we have talks every month. Someone will come in, maybe they'll do a talk on art rendering pipeline for mobile game like Proletariat Zombie Nation, or we'll have, what was their name? Tencent Boston came in, and how they made their MMO, or you'll have people doing talks on real-time audio mixing and all this stuff. But these user groups are really a great asset to the community. And I think on the Unity community site, there is a tab for user groups, but it's not very updated. And they said today they were trying to work on that more. Game jams. I actually think that game jams might be one of the best ways to learn how to make games if you're an artist, because you're not getting paid to do it. No one's doing it for money. It's all fun, and it's level. There's people in there who are AAA. There's people who are totally hobbyists, and you work together. And this is a picture of the VR game jam. There's Chet from Valve. Alex took a picture of me with my Oculus mouth. We were like, and that was a really great game jam. It was 2 days, and we showed off all the games, and it was a big event. But there's also a global game jam, there's local game jams. I've learned a lot from game jams, and a lot of people have. This is actually the concept art by Luigi Guattari from on the game jam I worked on. And we basically made like an Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom warehouse kind of puzzle game, stealth game where you're dodging robots coming through. And so that was a team of 8, so you can be like 1 person or 8 people. But when you work with people, you learn more. And a lot of people help each other, so it's a great learning tool. This is the Indie Game Collective, and these are different people from different studios. This happens to be in Cambridge, Mass, and there's different people from New Hampshire, Vermont, Boston, and we all come together and co-work. And so co-working, the Indie Game Collective does two things. We co-work together. We kind of help each other out, our different skill sets. So when you are working in isolation, you don't know how to do something, you're looking on the web, you're not finding it, it's always good to be able to be like, hey, I have this problem, how do you do this? So like I have an expertise that's more in art, 3D, and stuff like that, and I might have a really hard programming problem, and I'll like go to Dave, Mike, Dave, Alex, whoever, and be like, how do you do this? And they'll usually whip up some algorithm, or someone will be like, I need my robot, I need a robot for my game. I don't know how to do anything, I can't find anything on the asset store, can you make a game? Robot asset. So we help each other out in that way, and also on the business development side, like how do you publish, what are our connections, because business is a big part of publishing a game. And the other thing we do at the Indie Game Collective is that we mentor other studios and people getting into making games every Friday. We have a lunch, we invite people in, they show us their prototypes, and we give them feedback and links and mentorship. All right, so I'm going to try to wrap this up pretty soon. So third-party tools and assets, pros and cons are all the same things. So if something's visual, that's great, but like you don't know what's going on under the hood, and sometimes you can get things going visually, but you don't know what's going on under the hood. It can greatly speed up prototyping, and that's pretty much always good. But sometimes when people use a lot of third-party tools and they don't understand how they work, or if there's like some major update to Unity and then things break, so there's that always chance that your plugins won't work if you update Unity. It can be a problem. A lot of them use prefabs, like I was talking about NGUIs, all these prefabs, and people get confused about stuff. I'll just click down to control is probably, when you're using third-party plugins and assets, you do lose an element of control. But a lot of times, people will just prototype with it, especially if you know how to program already, and just to like prove, is this game going to be fun? And then you can go back in and reprogram it, stuff like that. Third-party hardware support, so that's always a problem. I've picked up all kinds of hardware that disappears. There's no support, there's no drivers. A lot of hardware and the plugins require Unity Pro, and so that can be a downside. Licensing, is it per seat? Like I think NGUI was $90 per seat on your team, and that's kind of ridiculous. Hygiene. My first big issue with the Oculus is like, oh, I really want to do museum installation, but like everybody's putting this on their face. And if you go upstairs and see with Oculus's demo, they're actually like cleaning them now. But I think that if someone wants to make a lot of money, you should make some kind of like hygiene adapter for that. And I love Oculus. And then the developers who make these tools, they're not all created equal. So you can go on the asset store. So I've been like, yay, asset store, it's awesome. There's also a lot of stuff on there that's just like people threw together and put on. So you should really pay attention to the ratings, read the reviews on them, see if the developers are giving good feedback. Sometimes developers are really dismissive of people asking questions like, you idiot, why didn't you do that? And that's not usually most of them. There are a few like that. But it's definitely good to do your research, like look at them up on social media, come to Unite and talk to them. A lot of times I'll like tweet, like, I'm going to Unite, I can't wait to see this or that, or I use this, and they're like, oh, I'm at Unite, let's talk. So get to know those developers. You might even get on some kind of betas or something like that. And so I guess this is the last slide, which is my contact info, if you want to get in touch with me. So again, I just wanted to reiterate that anyone can make these prototypes with these tools, but you don't really even have to be a novice to use these tools. It's really, it empowers you to prototype quickly, to make your game stand out and look different without spending hours of programming. Definitely connect with your community, do game jams, ask for help, work with each other. In Boston, there's this spirit of collaboration and sharing, and I think it comes from it being like a college town and a tech town. So at these meetups and all kinds of events, people are openly sharing. And I've been to other cities and other places in the world where it doesn't happen as much. Everyone's like, no, this is mine. Everyone doesn't want to show their prototype or their art or a game or whatever until it's finished. And then like they'll spend 3 years on it in a closet, and then it comes out and it's broken or it sucks or it's not fun. It's good to get out there and sort of work together. So does anybody have questions about any of these things that I've talked about? None. Awesome. Oh, you do? Oh, there's a microphone. Sorry. Is this being recorded?
Of all the different plugins and everything, did you have any particular favorites? Just your own personal?
So honestly, I think I would rather personally program myself. So the programming ones, Playmaker seems interesting for me for doing quick programming. But actually, as of today, I think my favorite plugin is ShaderForge. Being more of a 3D artist than an artist, it just seems like you can really make your game visually stand out with that. And it depends what you're making. And also, my company's working on a VR branching narrative story, so Dialogger will be good. So it really depends on what you're using. But if you want to make a quick prototype and you don't really know how to program, I would highly recommend Playmaker over everything else to get started. It's really simple, and there's a lot of online support for that.
Yeah, when you picked up C#, did you use any books or any tutorials?
Yeah, there was a couple books. One was a basic computer science book, had nothing to do with Unity. Yeah. It was really basic. If you email me, I'll tell you what the books were, because I don't know off the top of my head. So I had 2 books, and then I went through the Unity Learn site, and I just went through all their videos on like loops, variables, types, all that stuff. So that was really helpful. So I actually still listen to those on my commute to Boston from Vermont. I just have them on playing. So yeah, I use books that are just not even game specific, just computer science. And then tutorials online. There's also like ASM Games has some decent tutorials. Tornado Twins had some decent ones. But the Unity Learn site has a lot of really good ones.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you.